guys, this is my name is Chris. I run this channel, Chris Gastronome, and I have never actually done a proper review of the very car this channel uses as its avatar. For those people who don't know that although this channel has a large and probably majority by this point cooking and travel videos, it's also a racing channel. I don't race anymore because of just some politics with the local racing group, so I don't race anymore. If I was in another town, I'd probably still be racing. So I drive a 2010 Lancer Evolution, and this is going to be the closest thing to a long-term review on the car. Now, I am its second owner. I purchased this car in June of 2010. 2010. So I've had this car now for 11 years. This is an American car. It is at 49,781 miles, which is quite low for a car of this length. I have the rarest model of Lancer Evolution X that ever existed. Some people think it's a final edition. That is not true. The final edition has, I think, 2,000 units. This is a 2010 Lancer Evolution SE. And while we're talking, I'll be throwing some photos up here so you can see the evolution of the car as I've owned it. So yeah, I have owned this car for 10 years, and there are only 345, 350, 360, somewhere around 350 plus or minus 10 or 15 models of the SE. So it is an extremely rare car. What is the Lancer Evolution SE? Well, the Lancer Evolution SE was, it's kind of a mix between the top model MR and the low model GSR. Externally from the outside, it looks exactly like a GSR. It has the black trim, it has non-color matched panels and so forth, and it doesn't have the little chrome bits around the front. And it has a black front to the bumper instead of the kind of grayish silver tone. So from the outside it looks like a GSR, but it doesn't have the GSR's wings. It doesn't have the GSR small wing or the larger wing. It has this little lip that's from the MR. So externally there is an indication that there's something a bit different. Plus there's also an SE badge in the back. However, inside is where things change slightly. Interior is still from the GSR, and which means it's a pretty piss poor interior. Like there's no any form of luxury comforts. The seats are of course the same seats everyone else gets, except the MR gets leather seats. I have fabric. I think I like the fabric. I think it breathes better, and I think it lasts a bit longer. That's my personal opinion. But I don't have the sat nav or the subwoofer. Now in the interim, and I'll go into this in another video, I have now installed many of the MR stuff. I have the MR subwoofer in the back. I have a sat nav system now, an in-dash screen. So I do have some of the creature comforts. Obviously, I don't have the leather seats, but I do have the MR suspension. Now, the MR had a much better suspension than the GSR. In Canada, they released a model called the GSR with handling package, which I don't believe existed in America, and that was the GSR with all the performance mods from the MR. That's pretty close to what an SE is, but the SE still had a few things that were different than the GSR with handling package. The biggest one is I have the upgraded brakes, the upgraded suspension of the MR. I once went to a actual rally shop that builds SCCA Pro rally cars, and I told them that. And I said, they asked what an SE was, and I said it has all the performance mods of the MR, but none of the creature comforts. And they went, yes, it's exactly the type of car we like. Oddly enough, that was a Subaru dealership, the builder, which is a tale for another video. So that's the SE. Now, there's a part of me that regrets not getting the MR because obviously I later spent a bunch of money to get some of those mods put in. The MR wasn't too much more expensive, so I should have gotten an MR. But that being said, I really like the exclusivity of having the SE. And the other big thing, the big difference, of course, is that unlike the GSR with handling package, the base GSR, I have the TC SST dual clutch transmission that is found in the MR. So, just talking about how the car is. Now, I've owned numerous cars. My first car was a Ford Probe. It was junk. Second car was a second generation Hyundai Tiburon, the one that ripped off parts from the Celica. I really liked that car, only 130 horsepower. I had that car for kind of the dawn of the Fast and the Furious phase. any horsepower. It still had 140 horsepower, but it had lowered springs and 17-inch wheels. I had that car for 2 years. I eventually upgraded that to the newer, third generation, the one that beefed up the suspension, gave it a V6, increased the weight substantially. That car was actually also a rarity. I had the Tuscany, which was only available in Canada. Every dealership only got one or two. It was only available in yellow, and then the next year they had another model where you can get it in blue, but there's only a couple hundred of these that ever existed. And I had the Tuscany badging, and I dumped way too much money in that car. Oh my god, I put too much money in that car. That was, it was probably one of the reasons why I fell into financial ruin. But it had an actual real carbon fiber hood, catback exhaust system, cold air intake. It did unfortunately have the clutch from the old Tucson, so I blew that clutch out from dragging and from autocrossing. And I do believe the new owner inherited that bad clutch, and I told him to get it fixed, but I don't know if he ever did. After that, I languished with a bunch of cheaper cars, beaters, for a couple of years until I got financially stable again. And then I got a Civic SE, which was I think two generations before they started giving it a lot of real horsepower. And I had 190 horsepower, like 140 pounds of torque, but that's the VTEC for you. That's how VTEC worked. Did race that car. I raced it quite a bit. But my dream car was always a Lancer Evolution. Now, why was Lancer Evolution the car I've always wanted to own? You have Jackie Chan to think about that. So Jackie Chan is basically sponsored by Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi's pop in almost every one of his movies. And in Who Am I? A Lancer Evolution 4 pops up. A beautiful Lancer Evolution 4. And I fell in love with this car. I had no idea what it was. Like, what is this beautiful car? And I fell madly in love with the Lancer Evo. And then got discouraged because you can't own one in North America, at least then. And then the Evo 9 came out for America. We didn't get it in Canada because we have stricter safety regulations. And then finally, we got the Lancer Evolution X. In 2008. It would still be another 2 years before I'd get one. Now, you're probably wondering, wait, I've been talking about Canada. People know, who watch this channel, that I am Canadian. How do I have an American trim SE? Because the SEs didn't exist in Canada. That's because, as part of the story, is that the Evolution is extremely expensive in Canada. We're talking a 20% to 35% price hike over the Americans. And to discourage Canadians from crossing the border, just buying them in America, they basically invalidate your warranty. So you can't get your car's warranty covered at a Canadian dealership. You have to drive to an American dealership to get it serviced, which sucks. And I had to do that just once. Storage that. So it was actually cheaper for my local dealership, which was not a Mitsubishi dealership, because we don't have a Mitsubishi dealership in town, to order that than it was to get a Canadian Mitsubishi. That's how kind of amazingly stupid that is. It was cheaper to ship an American Mitsubishi than it was to transport a Canadian Mitsubishi and sell me that. And I had a choice. I had a choice between an SE and an MR, and I went for the SE, and that's the story. So this car hasn't left town much. It went on a big road trip as part of its warranty. For a lot of people, they're aware that with the Lancer Evolutions, the all-wheel control pump does fail in the back. That was a $3,000 repair job, but thankfully, unlike the rest of the car, which has like a 3-year warranty, they gave the all-wheel control pump a much larger warranty because they know they failed. So I contacted the Mitsubishi dealership in Seattle, booked an appointment, drove all the way down there with my wife. We went on vacation for a week. Yep, came in, dropped the car off. They looked at it for a couple hours, realized the all-wheel control pump had failed. Then I had to go back in there a week later to get it swapped out. So it was basically a day trip both times. So it wasn't the end of the world, and the work was done. And so this all-wheel control pump has now been fixed on this car. Since that, knock on wood, this car has not had any mechanical failures. I burned out my brake discs through racing, so they've been replaced. I'll talk about that in the modifications video. Windshields have been replaced a couple of times. I clipped a snowbank and cracked my bumper, so that bumper's been repaired. And someone, of course, vandalized my car. Someone drew a big key mark, which you can see in some of the photos. Very large, about a foot long, across my back, and I had that for 8 years until I finally fixed it. I just never got around to it. I don't know why I never got around to it, but I just never really got around to it. And so my car right now, thankfully, which we'll see in the next video, is the best as it's looked in a very, very long time. driving the car long term, you would think would suck. I actually really feel good in this car. So let's talk about why the Lancer Evolution is such a good car, why it's probably better than previous generations, and why it's the best car I've ever owned of all the other cars I've owned. The first and foremost is that it has gobs of horsepower. Even stock, in my hometown, I can outrun 99% of the things on the road. 99.5. A couple of vets, and of course, this is starting to change slightly because the new STIs, even the Golf Rs, are boasting more horsepower. So yeah, this is going to drop because a lot more cars are coming out with more horsepower. But even now, it's still 95%. I never have to worry. The car is incredibly fast. Is it bad on gas? If you're racing it, absolutely. I will burn through a quarter or half a tank on an autocross weekend, easily. On the highway, it's not as bad as you might think. The car can be milked very conservatively. Is it comfortable? Yeah, shockingly it is. Some people have complained about my suspension. Thankfully, because I have a stock suspension, even though it's a very good, very well managed suspension, it is a rougher ride, and even on long drives, it doesn't flatten my butt. These seats were, and I'm a big guy, 230 some pounds, and these seats still fit me, right? The bolsters are a little tight just on the side, but I find the whole thing very, very comfortable. This is something that's very important. This is something I need to stress. In my wife's Rogue, a Nissan Rogue, which is an SUV, I have to move the seat all the way to the back. And even then, my knees are kind of high, which is surprising for an SUV. I've gotten used, because I'm 6'3", of never really fitting in cars very well. My Tiburons are another perfect example. My Tiburons, I would constantly rub against the roof. If I had a helmet on, I would literally be wedged in the sunroof cavity. And my knees were well up to the, I would say, to the 5 and 7 positions on the steering wheel. That's how high they were, right? And they would hang over. And even the Civic was not great. It was a bit better, but it still wasn't great. The Evo X is built for taller people. Shockingly, this is absolutely true. I am ecstatic with the room. No one ever talks about this. Whenever people talk about room, the number of times I've been in cars, sports sedans, SUVs, and I have been unable to be fully comfortable. Even in the Nissan Rogue, I'm a tall guy, so I generally have to move the seat all the way to the back. I don't have to do that with this car. I mean, look at here. That is like 3 or 4 inches over my head. I've never owned a car or been in a car for a long period of time that had that much headroom. Like, that is so satisfying. And when I stop here, I'll prove something else to you. My seat still has room to go back. This is just fully back, and my knees can actually go completely underneath the steering wheel. Steering column's all the way up because it's adjustable. But yeah, my knees are at the same level at the bottom of the steering wheel. They don't have to go up. Now, I actually find that a little uncomfortable. So I have no brand loyalty to Mitsubishi. And I fully admit there's some definitely advantages of the Subaru, especially the new STIs. Especially the new STI, which looks a lot like an Evo. I love that one. I love the one before it. The STI that came out the same year as this Evo wasn't a good car. And I think even STI owners will consider it a step back. The one before and the ones after have definitely been better. The reason why I didn't get an STI was because of my love of the Evo brand and because of the transmission. And now that may seem a strange thing. I don't understand this love of manual transmissions. I've owned them. Every car I've ever owned was a manual transmission. And people talk about, oh, I like a manual, there's more of a connection to the car, you know, you get more control of your shifting. That's completely psychological. That's not true at all. If manual transmissions were as superior as people say, most of the time these are younger people, but if manuals were as good as they say, then every single professional motorsport would still be using manual transmissions, and none of them are. Most of them are doing double clutch. Most of them are doing single clutch with a very fast shifter. This is a double clutch. And I would say one of the reasons why I got the Evo was because I wanted the transmission, because I could go in manual and could just cruise and not worry about constantly having to shift. With my Civic, because it revs so high, in the street that I left my house, I would shift 3 times in the first 5 seconds. It just got tedious after a while. And people say, like, I can feel what my car's doing from the feedback in the pedals. And whenever I hear that, because I've heard that a couple of times, I kind of scoff at that. And I'm like, wait a second, you're not supposed to drive with your hand always on the shifter. You're supposed to have both hands on the wheel. Race car drivers will have both hands on the wheels, and they only move off to shift, and then they move their hands right back to where it started. You're not supposed to ride the clutch pedal with your foot. That's also not healthy for the car. So these are the only places where you can get feedback of your RPMs. I have an RPM gauge, so I can see it. I actually don't need it. I actually am a very bad driver when I have music on, because I forget where my shifting point is, because I can't hear the engine noise. I rarely ever look at my tack. And flappy paddles are incredibly useful. And when someone says I can shift faster, no, you can't. Yes, with a slush box, absolutely. But with the newer transmissions, especially the dual clutch, I know that the DSG by Volkswagen is faster. This is still really fast. It's still faster than any human being could ever shift, and there is nobody that can actually shift faster than this. The dual clutch is a fast system. I have launch control, which is astounding. I have a little video also, which you can find on my channel, which should be testing out my launch control. Launch control is amazing. You know, make sure all your control settings are off. All wheel control, yaw control off. Keep it in super sport mode. Slam the brake. Slam the accelerator. It pings to 5,000 RPM and sits there. Lift the brake. Boom, the car goes off. And I never have to destroy my clutches doing it. It is fan-friggin-tastic, the dual clutch. And whenever someone says, I prefer the manual, you know, sure, there is one advantage with the manual, is that it's cheap to upgrade. I know some people that have upgraded the clutches on their manual Evos themselves, and it only costs a couple of $100. Upgrading the clutch on the TCSSD is insanely expensive. That's the one advantage of the clutch, the manual clutches, and that's the reason why most high-powered Evos are using manuals, because it's so much easier to put a high-power clutch into the manual. Now, this car, and I'll go into this in more detail in the mods video, has been upgraded. And people will know that one of the leading dealerships in North America for Mitsubishi is called Cosmic. They're based out of Texas, which is oddly enough where this car is from. And they are specialized, and they have an extreme focus on upgrading the dual clutch gearboxes. And they have upgrade plates. And yeah, so there was a time, because I did actually destroy this clutch. I didn't actually destroy this clutch from racing. I was one of those idiots that when I came to replace the transmission fluid, I put the wrong fluid in, which people claimed it worked. And at the end of the day, you cannot put anything in the transmission other than the factory diaqueen. I made that mistake, so I started having problems with my clutch. So we put the car up, took the clutch basket out of the transmission, put it in a box, shipped it to Texas. 5 weeks later, Cosmic shipped it back with 400-pound torque clutch plates, and never had a problem since. Trunk space is really bad, I'll say that. You know, because the windshield washer and the battery is in the back, my seats don't fold down, so. So yes, there you go, folks. That is my long-term review of my Lancer Evolution SE, which is closing in on crossing into 50,000 miles, which is really good for an 11-year-old car. And I hope to have it for another 11 years. I may jinx myself doing that. But in my next video, I'm going to go over the mods list, what I have done over the history of the car. So that's me. Have a good day. Like and subscribe if you wish.